Welcome to this month's edition of OSU Extension Monthly. It's April and soon to be May, and we're going to talk about gardening a little bit, but we're going to take a different avenue today. We're going to talk about plant propagation. What is plant propagation? It is the purposeful act of reproducing plants. When I was a little girl, my mother had a green thumb like you wouldn't believe, and she would just go out and pluck cuttings and take things off of different plants and plant them in the ground, and they would grow. Of course, I grew up in southeastern Oklahoma where there's a lot of humidity and moisture in the air, and you could do that. I've learned since I've moved out to the panhandle here that it's not as easy to propagate plants as it was when I was growing up. There are two types of plant propagation, one being seeds, and of course you can buy seeds and just plant them, or if you're actually doing the propagation process, you are removing the seeds from the plant or the fruit of the plant. This happens to be some squash seeds that were saved from some squash last year. It's an organic heirloom sweet meat squash. I'm very anxious to get these planted and see how they do. Sometimes it doesn't work so well. When we talk about seeds, we're talking about a reproductive or a sexual type of propagation. And then there's also the vegetative or division cutting, the layering, the budding, and the grafting. We're not going to get into all of those today because we will not have enough time. But asexual propagation is reproduction by means of using the vegetative plant, such as some of the plants that I have here today with me. This is actually a geranium, and geranium can be by cutting, can be propagated. In my little greenhouse that I have here, take this off for you so you can see. This is actually also a trailing geranium, and this one we just took a cutting off. We need just a little bit of the root of an area right here, a nodule, so that it can develop the root. But all I'm going to do is stick that back in that dirt. And because I used a greenhouse system for that, it's going to give it the humidity, keep it the temperature that it needs. We won't even need to water these plants once we put them in our little greenhouse here, because oversaturation is the biggest problem that most people have with propagating their plant. They just get them too much water. And so you can put them in a little greenhouse. Other things you can do is to put a mason jar over a cutting. Let's say that we put the plant in there. That's not going to work because it's not big enough, but you would put it over there. I've seen my mother take cuttings from rose bushes and stick them in the ground and put a mason jar over the top of it, and it would root and grow. So that is a possibility. In this one, we've got several plants here. This one is a basil. As you can see, maybe you can't see, I don't know, but this has been in this soil for only 1 week, and it has already sprouted roots. You can see this little long root right here, and then there's another little one right there, and it's growing some right there. All we did was snip this off of a current basil plant, stuck it in this dirt, and put the top on. This has a little control, so you can open it up if it gets too much moisture in there, because remember, we don't want too much water on our plants. They don't need a lot of water. Now, there is such a thing as rooting in water, and this was a common household ivy plant, and I've just clipped it off. Next to a leaf there, I pulled off a bottom leaf right here. The important thing with this is that you need a little nodule right here, because that's where the roots will come from. But it will root in water. This will take about a week to do, and I've got a whole nother plant, although I already have one of those plants. Typically, we don't need to have any fertilizer for propagation of plants, but a rooting hormone is guaranteed to give you a better success rate. I don't actually have any rooting hormone here today, but this little basil right here was actually stuck in some rooting hormone before it was put into the soil, which actually gave it some help. This is a begonia leaf. So see, sometimes you can take something as simple as a leaf like this and stick it in the soil and it will form roots right there. So right now, in about a week and a half or so, I am going to have 2 trailing geraniums that I can set out. These are also the citronella plant that repels mosquitoes. So, you know, we like to have those around here because it won't be too long until we'll be complaining about those pesky old mosquitoes. This is basil. I have 2 pieces of basil here. I like to use basil out of my garden in my Italian foods that I cook. So I'm going to be ready for that later on. And then here is another ivy, excuse me. This is an ivy, an English ivy. I've put one in the soil with rooting hormone, and then I've got one in my glass of water. Now it's really important that the plants get light. They don't need intense light, but they do need some light. Fluorescent light bulbs, highly recommended. And you really want to coordinate the light from your cutting with the ones that you're trying to root. Try to keep that as close to the same as possible. That way it doesn't have to adjust in that manner. And of course then it takes being patient. It takes being patient. That means I was really surprised whenever I pulled the basil up this morning that there was already roots on it. I figured we probably needed to wait at least another 3 or 4 days, but that didn't happen. You want to make sure that the cuttings aren't laying in the dirt per se. So this one right here, he's kind of laying over, but still his roots are down in the soil really well, which you need. This one, I know if you can see this one right here, this is kind of what we call layering. We have laid it in the dirt so that it will form the roots from the nodules that are there. That way we're going to get a plant from it. It's already beginning to form some roots that I can see there. It's been there about a week now, and so that will be a you know, I actually have forgotten what that plant is. I'll have to find out what that plant is. Okay, you don't want to take cuttings that are really, really big. Now this one looks like a really big cutting, and it really is, and this one's a pretty good sized one. But if you get them too large, what happens is that they will grow lanky, leggy, and won't be pretty plants for you. So you want to make sure that you don't get really huge cutting. 4 to 6 inches is about the recommended length of a cutting that you should get. Again, as I said, I don't have any rooting hormones here today, but that does help with your process and helps you become more successful. Really, you don't have to do much more than what I just talked about, except when you get ready to plant them, you have to harden them off, just like you do other plants that you grow indoors and then you're going to move outdoors. So when my geranium gets the roots on it, I'm going to set it out for a few hours every day, and keep adding time to it for 2 or 3 days to get it hardened off. And then I will actually put it out in a pot so that I will have a trailing geranium citronella plant by my front door, and hopefully that's going to keep some of those pesky mosquitoes away. Not every plant can be propagated by every method, but most plants can be. Sometimes we propagate by division. This is typical of like irises. This is certainly not the time of the year to be propagating your irises. They need to have bloomed. It needs to have rained, and of course we haven't had enough rain lately for our plants as it is. So in the fall, I will lift my irises that are getting too full, too clumpy, and I will divide those. And basically what you do is you just dig them up out of the soil, and then you cut a root off and you plant it. And I've had very, very good luck with propagating of irises here in the Panhandle. So that's something you can do. There's recommended varieties to be cut or propagated a certain way. For example, for fruit trees and things, you do grafting. I've never actually myself ever done any grafting, so I don't know how successful I might be, but that is how we get a lot of our new varieties of roses and apples and peaches and what have you. All of our fruits and things is because they have grafted different plants together to improve the quality of the plant. And something I didn't mention, but the materials, your rooting medium, which is potting soil. This is just basic potting soil in my greenhouse here. It needs to be deep enough so that the plants have room to produce and grow these roots. For example, this little basil here that already has roots, probably in about 3 or 4 more days, I'm going to take that out and actually plant it in probably a cup or a peat pot, whatever you might have. Excuse me, to let it grow a little longer, get those roots a little stronger, and then I will move it out into my garden area. It's very important that we not move them too much, because every time you move a plant, you're disturbing its root system. So, it's also not a good idea to use your common garden soil. If you're wanting to propagate plants, you really need to invest in some potting soil or something that has been sterilized. Any container that you use when you're wanting to root or propagate plants should be sterilized. You got to wash it in hot soapy water and rinse it. Soak it in a bleach solution that's like 1 part bleach to 9 parts of water, and leave it in there for about 1 hour. Then wash again in soapy water, rinse, and then dry it. So I can't just go to the cabinet and pick out a cup and say I'm going to stick a plant in there. And yeah, it may work, but then again, I've lessened my chances. Again, high humidity is very critical in successful rooting a plant. There's lots of ways. Placing a jar over the plant is one of the ways. We talked about that already. You need to have some space between the jar and your container that you've got the plant in. There's got to be room. You will notice in this one, it already has some water in it. We're going to go ahead and put this back on here, because a really important thing is that we never let our plants that are in the rooting soil, the potting soil, dry out, because that will just ruin your whole process. So most house plants and garden plants take about a week to root. It sort of depends on the particular plant. Like I said, I was a little bit surprised at the basil, but it has been a week. But then the other plants are not there yet. So we'll give them some more time. Again, full sunlight is absolutely a no-no. You do not want to get your plants that hot. I mean, it will scorch them and they will not produce. There's some other types of cuttings that we won't get into today, but if you're really, really interested in learning more about propagation of plants, you can stop by the Texas County OSU Extension Office and we can help you learn a little bit more about that. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit right now, because I found these really cute little planters. And I just think they're really cute, these little puppy dogs of mine. So we're going to do those and talk a little bit about when you plant in a planter. So we're going to start with this little fellow right here. So he's little. He kind of lays down on the ground like and stuff. He's lined with plastic so I can put soil in there and keep him watered, which anytime you put plants in a planter, they do need more water than if they're out in the ground. So this little feller, I'm going to put some dirt in there. And I have picked small plants like the violas and the pansies to put in him. So we got some little dirt in there. Whenever you take plants out of a pot, because I purchased these, I did not grow them myself, and so they have a really nice little root system. I'm not really going to need to cut the roots, but sometimes you need to do that. So we're going to put this little fella right in here. I bet we need to turn, oops. Or if we turn him sideways a little bit, can we see him a little better that way? Yeah. And so because I wanted something trailing in there, I have picked out some of these little, they're called coconut plant. We're going to pull these out. Now you may notice at the bottom of this where the roots have kind of bound together there. So it's always important whenever you buy plants that have become root bound in the pot that you take a knife and you split those roots. It won't hurt it. As a matter of fact, it's almost necessary so that you loosen up those roots and they will spread out and your plant will be healthier that way. So we're going to put him in here with this. Really didn't need a lot of potting soil in here because he's not very big. But I just think he's awfully cute. And then I have this bigger little guy over here. We're going to put some geraniums in him. As you remember, geraniums are something that you can propagate. This particular plant, you've just got to, I could probably cut off this little stem that's right here that doesn't have flowers on it yet, or this little stem right here would probably be the best one, and stick that in the dirt and it would grow. This is a zonal geranium. We're going to put a little bit of dirt in there. I found with the other ones I don't need as much as I thought I might. You can always remove if you get too much. So, again, we're going to pull him out, and I can see already from the bottom we've got some root bound there, so we're going to take that knife and just make cuts to loosen up those roots. And then we're going to stick him in our pot. Now I think he needs a little bit more, so we're going to put some spike grass in there. I'm not going to cut his roots, I'm just going to separate them because I easily can. Yeah. And we're going to put him in there. And what else could I put in there? Does he need anything else, or does he look pretty good? I'm thinking he might need another geranium. We might just do that after the show today, just to go ahead and add another geranium to that pot. And some more white flowers over here, or blue flowers over there. So, the last thing I want to show you today is also cactus are very, very good for propagation. So like the little hens and chicks, you can break off one of those, stick them in the dirt, and they'll grow. This one happens to be kind of tiny, but he's a jade plant. So we have just taken the leaf off of the little plant. And then we just kind of basically just laid it on the dirt. And you don't need much water with this because cactuses don't need much water to start with. They don't need a lot to propagate. In here, it's already growing some little cactuses, and they're so cute. They are so cute. So, let's see, what else can I talk about? Some of the things that you need for propagating plants by cutting are, of course, you need the plants. A begonia plant, that is what I have in there. You can do that by cutting. That actually happens to be a leaf, not a true cutting. For most plants, it's got to be 4 to 6 inches. I think I've already told you that. And you want to make sure that you get it small enough that it doesn't grow real tall and lanky and not look like the original plant. So you need potting pots, pre-moistened soil. Any potting soil that you can find will work. Not recommending any particular brand. This just happens to be what I picked up today. You need some shears or pruners or a knife. You need your rooting hormone. You need plastic cups, one to help dig dirt or to put your plant in. It's also nice to have a pencil or something that you can make a hole in your soil to put your plant in so that you can just lift it in there. You want to remove the leaves from any plant that you want to propagate. You may notice in this particular jar right now, my leaf has fallen down into the water, and that will cause it to rot, and you will not get your plant to root. So it's really important that we take off those lower leaves. And I'm just going to take a pair of scissors and clip it off. And then that way I do not have any materials in there that will cause me not to be successful with my propagating a plant. So that one is ready. We'll just leave it in there for a while, and in about a week or so I should see some little roots growing right from that little nodule right there. But you also want to make sure that you remove any of those leaves. Even if you're planting it in the dirt, you want to make sure that you've removed the leaves, okay? You don't want to contaminate your rooting hormone. So it's not recommended that you directly stick something into your rooting hormones. I've seen people do that, but you can pour some out and stick it in there so that you don't contaminate your rooting hormone. But you really don't have to go and buy a whole bunch of things to be able to propagate plants, and that's what makes it a really exciting, fun thing to do, is because you don't really have to have a lot of tools. Of course, you do need the potting soil, and you do need some water if you're going to root it in water. Actually, if you put it in a greenhouse where you get the humidity, you should never have to water those plants. And if you do, you're probably going to ruin your successes. When you put the potting soil or the rooting hormone in a little cup and dip your plants in there so that you don't contaminate the rest of your rooting hormone. You just dip it in there. That's all you do, is just dip it in there. And then you can also propagate if you don't have a greenhouse like this. It's not a plant that can be rooted in water, etc. You can use plastic bags to make a little tin over your plant and to help it keep the humidity and the moisture. A lot of people like to use little bell jars to put their plants in or cover their plants with, and that would make a really nice, attractive display while you're rooting plants, which is really important. Again, as I said earlier, if you have any questions about planting a garden, propagating plants, what to do with seeds that are dormant, etc. You could stop by the Texas County OSU Extension Office at 301 North Main here in Guyman, and we've got all types of information to help you with that. Also, coming up in the future here, we will have some programs that will focus on diabetes and eating for diabetes. Really an important subject for most people these days, because we do know that a lot of us are probably walking around and have diabetes and don't realize it. So be looking forward to those things. And then, of course, soon school will be out and we'll be getting involved in our summer activities. I hope you have a happy growing season this spring, that all of your dreams come true in terms of what you want to plant and grow, and that you will enjoy the great outdoors that's been provided for us. Sometimes it's not so great when that wind blows like it has been lately, and we've had those dust storms. But hopefully we'll get some rain, and that will change things. So I just ask that you pray for rain, and so that we can breathe around here. I talked about allergies last month, and this dust storms are just not helping any of us at all. Check us out on Facebook. We have a Texas County Agriculture Facebook page. We have a Texas County Family and Consumer Sciences Facebook page, as well as a Texas County 4-H page, Facebook page. So we are here to serve you and would love to visit with you, so stop by and see us sometime.